All right, we're going to start our ratio chapter, ratios and proportions. And I think what you'll find is we've actually run into ratios a lot this year. We just didn't call them ratios. So here's our first lesson, which is students will be introduced to vocabulary associated with ratios and then be able to write a ratio in 3 or 4 different forms given ratio problems. You'll also be able to identify what type of ratio we're looking at. So we'll be putting this in our vocab goodbye list, but our word is a ratio, and that is a comparison of values or 2 different units that is using division. And we'll find with proportions is a multiplicative relationship, just like equal fractions was. So let's get going. All right, you have a recording sheet and it has boxes like this. So for every problem we do today, you are going to be filling in this box. So again, a ratio is a comparison of 2 quantities using division. Count the coins to compare the number of pennies to the number of nickels. The word ratio comes from the Latin word ratus, which means calculation. In the Middle Ages, the word ratio was used to mean computation. So we're going to take a look at our pile of coins here. The very first thing we always need to do when writing a ratio or later on solving proportions is it's really important to label. So you're comparing 2 different units, 2 quantities. Well, we need to know what those are. So if we are comparing the pennies and the nickels, then our first unit is going to be pennies. Now it's okay to abbreviate, and then nickels right here. Um, then we're going to look at the number of pennies, which I can see is 5, and the number of nickels, which I can see is 3. Now notice I have to have 5 on the top where I identified it was pennies. Nickels, I need to make sure that the number of nickels is down on the bottom. So what this means is for every 5 pennies, there are 3 nickels. That's what a ratio means. It's a for every statement. For every 5 pennies, there are 3 nickels. Other ways to write this, number 1 is as a fraction. We read this 5 to 3. The ratio of pennies to nickels is 5 to 3. Another way we write it is with a colon, 5 colon 3. And another way is actually to write in words 5 to 3. So this is 4 ways to write this ratio. All right, so again, what it asks us to do here is compare the number of pennies to nickels. So there are 3 different ways, which we have done already. And then I do want to identify what type of ratio this is. Because we're comparing pennies to nickels and saying that that's 5 to 3, that is a part-to-part ratio because we have a whole group of coins. Part of them are pennies compared to another part that are nickels. So we're going to call this a P to P. That stands for a part-to-part ratio. Part of the group is being compared to another part of the group. All right, suppose you wanted to compare the number of boys to girls in a class that had 15 boys and 13 girls. The first quantity in this case, the boys, is always written first. So when I read a story problem, I'm going to underline the important information, 15 boys and 13 girls. You notice that this unit or quantity comes first. So that needs to go on top of our ratio. So let's start with our labels. We have boys and girls. So unit 1, we're going to write down boys. Unit 2, we're going to write down girls. Now we need to identify how many boys. There were 15 boys and there were 13 girls. Now remember, since boys comes first in the story problem, boys comes on top. Since boys is 15, the 15 goes on the same line as boys, and then 13 goes on the same line as the girls. Now let's practice writing that a few different ways. Um, Whichever one is on top of this ratio, that's going to come first when we write it like this. So 15 over 13 is the same as 15 colon 13. we could also write that as 15 to 13. And we could also say for every 15 boys, there are 13 girls. What type of ratio is this? Well, I'm comparing part of the class are boys to part of the class are girls. So this is also a part-to-part ratio. If I were comparing the boys to the whole class, that would be part to whole because part of the class compared to the whole class. We'll have some examples like that later on. All right, here's another problem. Notice with the same numbers, 15 boys and 13 girls, a comparison of girls to boys would yield an entirely different answer. So if our question says, what is the ratio of girls to boys? Notice girls comes first and boys comes second. So now unit 1 is girls. Unit 2 is boys. Do your labels first. Now we need to go into the problem and look, how many girls were there? That's right here. There are 13 girls. How many boys were there? And there are 15. So notice what happened. We had 15 over 13 before, now we have 13 over 15. Order does matter. You need to look at what order the question asks. That's how you write your answer. If I have 13 over 15, how do I write that? 13 colon 15 or 13 to 15? I could say that as a for every statement. For every 13 girls, there are 15 boys. That is still a part-to-part ratio because part of the class are girls to part of the class are boys. So there's 4 ways to write that, and that is a part-to-part ratio. Now suppose you wanted to compare the number of boys to the total number of students in the class that had 15 boys and 13 girls. The first quantity in this case, the boys, is written first. So again, it wants me to compare, do a ratio of the number of boys to the total number of students. So let's start by taking our units that are in the question and labeling. So first unit, how many boys? Compare that to the total students. Now we'll go into the question, now that we know our labels, and figure out how many boys were there. Well, it says right here there's 15 boys. Now here's where you have to be careful. Total students. It doesn't tell me the total students, but I could figure that out. Part plus part equals whole. We know that. So if one part's 15, the other part is 13, then our whole, we're going to add that together, is going to be 18. So use what we know. So total students, will be 28. Okay, so your total students is 28. So again, how do we read this? There are 15 boys to 28 students. Other ways to write it, 15 colon 28, 15 to 28, or we could say for every 15 boys, there are 28 students. Now this is going to be a part to whole ratio because boys is part of the class, total students is the whole class. So we would circle part to whole or P to W. All right, let's try something else. What is the ratio of green fish to orange fish? Some of these answers are right, some are wrong, and you're gonna do it on your diagram. Well, let's start with our labels. Please underline, or I will underline, green and orange. Those are the units. Since green comes first, that's going to be unit 1. That goes on top. So green and then orange will go on the bottom. I don't ever want to see you do a ratio or proportions this year without labels. Always label. Because now it's really easy to look at the fish and say, oh, well, there's 2 greens. So I'll put a 2 on top. Then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 oranges. So I'll put 5 on the bottom. So one way we could say this ratio is green to orange is 2 to 5 or 2 over 5. We could also write that as 2 colon 5 or 2 to 5. We can say this as a for every statement. For every 2 green fish, there are 5 orange fish. So let's see which of these are true. 2 to 5, is that true? Yes, it is. Is 2 to 7 true if the question is green to orange? No. What this ratio tells me is this would be green to total fish, which is not what the question was asking. How about 5 over 2? Does that answer the question? No, because this would tell us orange fish to green, but the question asked green to orange. How about 7 to 5? That doesn't work either. This ratio tells me the total fish to the orange fish, but that's not what the question was asking either. How about 2 colon 5? That does answer my question. That tells me green to orange. 2 over 5 tells me green to orange. 5 to 2, that would be telling me the orange to green, and we wanted green to orange. So these are the ones that fit, and you can see that these do not. These explain a different type of ratio. All right. So now we're going to create, there are 4 fish in the tank. The ratio of green fish to orange fish is 1 to 3. So first we're going to show that with our picture. Well, first let's do our labels. So our first label is green. So unit 1 is going to be green. Then we have orange. That's going to be number 2. So orange. Now it tells us the ratio is 1 to 3. Because green was first, this first number refers to the green. Orange was second, so the second number tells us about the orange. So go ahead and write that all 3 ways. And then I can make my picture. I need 1 green fish in my tank, and I'm going to need 3 orange fish in my tank. All right, ways we could write this. 1 is on top, so that goes first. 1 colon 3 and 1, 2, 3. So for every 1 green fish, there are 3 orange fish. What type of ratio is this? We're comparing part of the fish, the green ones, to another part of the fish tank, which are orange. So that is a part-to-part ratio. Okay, what is the ratio of black fish to red fish? So again, we have to look at the order. First, it wants black, then it asks for red. So let's start with our labels. And you're actually going to need 2 of these, 1 for each tank. So we'll start with the first tank. Both are going to be black to red. All right, in the first tank, black to red, there are 2 blacks and there are 3 reds. So my ratio of black to red is going to be 2 to 3, or black over red is going to be 2 over 3. So go ahead and fill in the diagram. We can also say 2, 2, 3, or for every 2 black fish, there are 3 red fish. Okay, I'd like you to pause the video. You're going to fill out another diagram like this for the next tank. Unpause when you are ready. All right, and you can check your answer here. I was comparing black to red. There are 4 black, there are 6 red. I can also write that as 4 colon 6, 4 to 6, or say for every 4 black, there are 6 red. All right, so that concludes our video and our notes in class tomorrow. You will complete your packet with a partner and continue to work on ratios in class.